Good morning. I'd like to convene this meeting of the Judiciary Committee for today, Friday, May 3rd. We have comments from my co-chair, seeing none, ranking member, seeing none. We have one item before us. It's Roman number 3 on your agenda, and it is substitute for Senate Bill number 390, and that concerning penalties for certain election crimes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay. Moved by Representative Fishbein, seconded by Senator Sampson. Is there discussion? Senator Sampson.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for recognizing me to discuss the one item on the agenda today, Senate Bill 390. This particular bill comes to us from the Government Administration and Elections Committee, where I serve as the ranking member. It was introduced by myself as well as the House Republican caucus, and it's really a very straightforward bill that would increase the penalties for a number of election-related crimes to include mandatory minimum sentences. And obviously, this is in an effort to respond to recent events, particularly the Bridgeport mayoral election, where we saw on video, effectively, some election interference. And the Republican caucus, both the House and Senate, I think have been very forthright in making sure people understand our desire to address this problem. And we've offered a number of different proposals. So I'm very pleased to see this one still surviving in this legislative session and before us today. I urge my colleagues to support it. Just to be a little more detailed about what the bill does, there are a number of election-related crimes, everything from election officials interfering with tabulator machines or producing improper ballots to people that are actually engaged in ballot harvesting and interfering with elections. All of those things are already crimes, but to my knowledge, no one's ever served a moment of jail time in Connecticut for any of those things in the past, despite the fact that there have been convictions. And we'd like to see some increased penalties to act as a significant deterrent to this type of behavior in the future. And again, I encourage my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Comment or question from other members of the committee. Representative Stastrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, through you, some questions to the proponent of the bill, if I may. I guess it's a little awkward with the one microphone here, so I'm just gonna do it this way. Mr. Chair, so I heard the proponent talk about using this as a deterrent, and he mentioned, for example, I think Section 1 of the bill, which talks about an election official interfering with a tabulator. Through you, Mr. Chair, an election official, that would include someone who is employed just for that one day, who's working as sort of a checker or an assistant moderator, not a full-time employee of, say, the registrar's office, but one of those per diem employees that get hired just for the day of the election. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I will just be very specific and indicate that the language of the bill and the current crime, which does already exist, requires the election official to have intent to cause or permit any voting to fail to correctly register all votes. So they'd have to willingly and knowingly understand what they were doing.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, if someone who is just working for the one day is just the person who's working that first election, and yes, maybe they, with some degree of intent, cause the tabulator to fail, but that person has no prior criminal record, has been a model citizen in their community, has never had so much as a traffic ticket before. Under this language, if that person was found to have intentionally interfered with the tabulator, the judge would be required to sentence that person to 1 year in jail. That there would be no option for the judge to say, okay, we understand this is your first offense. You've never been in trouble with the law before. We're going to put you on probation. We're going to prohibit you from ever working on another election again, et cetera, et cetera. But the penalty must be 1 year in prison under this legislation. Is that correct through you, Mr. Chair?
That is what the bill says.
Okay. Mr. Chair, moving to Section 8 of the bill. Section 8 of the bill talks about the offense of any person who, with intent to disenfranchise, influences or attempts to influence. So it could be either has the effect of influencing someone or intends to influence someone by force or threat to stay away from any election shall be guilty of a D felony with a mandatory term of imprisonment of 12 months that may not be suspended or reduced. So, Mr. Chair, as I read that language, that would say, and I think we talked about this briefly in our committee earlier, or maybe it was a referred bill from the GAE committee, actually, that if there was someone standing outside of a ballot drop box or standing out in front of the polls, and maybe they were standing there with a firearm on their hip, or maybe just a sign that said, I'm carrying and stay away from the polls or something like that. And that had the effect of influencing someone not to vote, even if the person didn't intend to discourage that person from voting. But it had the effect of influencing someone from not voting by standing there looking precarious in front of the poll. As I read this language, again, that person would be guilty of a D felony. And even if that person had no prior criminal record, was a law-abiding, upstanding gun owner, permit-holding gun owner, a so-called good guy, that person would be forced. A judge would have no choice but to sentence that person to 1 year in prison. Isn't that correct through you, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, there are a number of issues I might take with your characterization of what could happen. I mean, first and foremost, if you have a person who has a gun on their hip that's exposed, they'd be in violation of Connecticut law already. And I don't know that merely possessing a firearm or having one on your hip, as you mentioned, rises to the level of having intent to disenfranchise electors or using deliberate or deceitful means. If they were waving a gun around and saying, "Don't come here, you are in danger," well, then yes, absolutely. I think that the judge ought to throw the book at them. But I think your characterization is a little misleading because the person would have to be committing other crimes first. Also, I would note that this is already a Class D felony, which my understanding can have a maximum sentence of 5 years already. So I believe that the law that it currently exists is there with a significant penalty for that purpose.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, we could quibble, and I know we don't have long here, so I'll be brief, but I guess we could quibble. But it's certainly, as I read this language, intent is not necessary, particularly with respect to influence. So if someone influences someone from staying away, maybe they don't have a gun that they're waving around, but maybe they have a NRA t-shirt and they're standing ominously in front of the polling place. And I am reasonably fearful that person may have a gun, and that influences me to stay away from the polling place. As I read this, that person be guilty of, you're right, under existing law, it could be a D felony. But a D felony, particularly for someone who's never had any run-in with the law before, is eligible for accelerated rehabilitation and would likely, as the proponent said in bringing out the bill, not serve a day in prison for that. They'd get a slap on the wrist, they'd be told not to do it again, and assuming they never did it again, they would not have a criminal record for that. But under this language, the judge's discretion to give that person AR would be taken away, and the individual would have to serve a year in prison. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move on to Section 9 of the bill. Section 9 of the bill talks about the crime of any person who during the period that is 60 days or less prior to any election attempts to influence the vote of any operative in his or her employ by threats of withholding employment. And then that person be guilty of a D felony with a maximum term of imprisonment of 12 months that may not be suspended or reduced under the bill. So, Mr. Chair, the hypothetical there, I suppose, is a business owner, someone who's a significant employer in the state and says, uh, you know, has a meeting, calls all of his employees together in the break room and says, do not go out and vote for the Democrats. They are tax and spend liberals. They are going to raise your taxes. They are going to drive up crime in the state. And I am going to have to lay you all off if you vote for the Democrats. Do not do that. That would be attempting to influence the vote of any operative in his or her employ by threats of withholding employment, as I read this language. And if that business owner did that, they would be subjected not just to a D felony, but under this language, again, the judge would be required, have no choice but to sentence that person to 1 year in prison. Through you, Mr. Chair, does the proponent agree with my reading of that language?
Mr. Chairman, you are correct. That's what the bill in front of us says. I would strongly encourage that if the member or anyone else takes exception to parts of this bill or specific items that are enumerated and thinks that they ought to be changed, we do have an amendment process.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to do that if you'd like. At this point, although effectively amending a bill with 5 days to go in the session would effectively kill it. So I was going to refrain from calling that amendment. Let me go through another hypothetical here, and then we can discuss. But I guess part of the reason I'm hesitant to amend this bill now is frankly the cognizance of this committee, the Judiciary Committee, is criminal penalties. And frankly, I believe, and I guess I'm telegraphing that I'm going to vote no on this bill, but part of the reason I'm going to vote no on this bill is this is a bill that should have had and should have originated in this committee. This is the committee that has original cognizance over our penal code and changing criminal penalties. And frankly, this bill in 11 different sections increases penalties, changes our penal code, and we should have had a vetting and a public hearing on it here as opposed to in another committee. But let me just go on to one last hypothetical, and then I'll stop. But Section 10 of this bill talks about any person who induces any elector to do any act for the purpose of enabling another person or persons to see or know for what person or persons such elector votes. And again, it's a D felony, term of imprisonment of 1 year, which cannot be suspended or revoked. So mandatory 1 year penalty. As I read that language, if I were to say to my constituents, go out this November, vote for Donald Trump, take a picture of your ballot when you go out and vote for Donald Trump and post it on Instagram for the world to know that you voted for Donald Trump and other folks should vote for Donald Trump too. If I said that to my constituents, is under this language, I would be guilty, as I read this, I'd be guilty of a D felony offense, and a judge would have no choice but to sentence me to 1 year in prison. Does the proponent read the language the same way I do on this one as well?
I don't believe so, sir.
All right. Well, Mr. Chair, I know the hour is getting late, and I've taken enough of the committee's time, but I do believe that's how this is read. I guess I will say, in summation, I will vote against this bill today for several reasons. Not that I don't take election crime seriously. In fact, this committee already passed out legislation, and I believe the legislation has cleared the House and hopefully will be called soon in the Senate, which would lengthen the statute of limitations for prosecuting election crimes. Criminal justice data shows what deters crime is prosecuting crime and prosecuting crime timely, increasing penalties, and hamstringing judges in terms of their ability to impose an appropriate sentence based on someone's prior criminal record, based on someone's standing in the community, based on the nature of the offense, does not deter crime. I believe this committee has taken the appropriate step in dealing with the situation by pushing to lengthen the statute of limitations. That's a bill that originated in this committee. This bill before us should have originated in this committee if it was going to be taken up. I see several flaws with it, and I'll be opposing it as a result. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Comment or question from members of the committee. Representative Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here in two capacities, both as a member of this committee and also as a co-chair of the Government Administration and Elections Committee. And I've got two things to say. For one of them, I'm going to disagree respectfully with the House Chair of the Judiciary Committee, and the other, I'm going to agree with him. I believe that it was appropriate for the Government Administration and Elections Committee to take up this bill, and it's appropriate and in fact required that it be here because it deals with criminal penalties, but it also deals with election law. So I'm going to agree with the good chair about the substance of the bill. However, mandatory minimums have been a tried and frankly a failed policy tool in the criminal justice system. They've contributed to over-incarceration. They have removed discretion that is vital to due process for individual judges to consider the individual facts of an individual case to decide an appropriate punishment. And frankly, they're not effective. Study after study has shown, as the good chair said, that what is effective is the potential wrongdoers' knowledge and understanding that they will be prosecuted and punished for a crime, not that there is a mandatory minimum sentence for that crime. Excuse me. And additionally, I believe the penalties for all these crimes, which are at least 5 years in every case, are plenty long to deal with the wrongdoing that could be covered by them. So you may ask, Blumenthal, why is this bill here? Why did you take up this bill in the Government Administration and Elections Committee? Well, we did it for two reasons. One is to address a collaborative approach and to entertain ideas from both sides of the aisle and to fully vet them and discuss them. The other is to communicate our feeling and our intent to the enforcement authorities and the Superior Court in this state that we do take these crimes seriously and they should be punished when people are convicted of them. And there'll be a much more robust bill dealing with election security and transparency being called later in the House. And for all those reasons, I'm not going to be supporting this bill today. And I thank the good chair for his indulgence.
Thank you. Comment or question from other members? Comment or question from other members? Seeing none, Madam Administrator, please call the roll.
Roll call vote on Senate Bill 390 to JF it to the floor. Winfield,
Winfield in the negative.
Staffstrom,
No.
Flexer, Quinn,
No.
Kissel, Fishbein, Blumenthal,
No.
Callahan,
Callahan, yes.
Conley, Curry,
Curry, no.
Delaney, Dillon,
Dillon, no.
Doucette, Dubitsky,
Trubisky, yes.
Elliott, Gaston, Gilchrist,
Gilchrist votes no.
Godfrey, Paul,
Paul, yes.
Harding, Hayes, Howard, Johnson,
Johnson votes no.
Khan, Labriola, Lesser, Marr,
Marr votes no.
Miller, O'Day,
O'Day votes yes.
Osborne,
Osborne votes no.
Havelock Tomato,
Tomato votes yes.
Porter,
Porter votes in the negative.
Sampson,
Sampson is yes.
Sims, Veach, Beach votes yes. Walker? Wilson?
Wilson votes no.
Okay, that is the only item we have. The votes will remain open till the start of the first session. Thank you for joining us.
Madam Administrator?
Yes, Representative. Representative Walker, you there? You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. How would you like to vote?
No.
Okay, you're all set. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator Gaston.
The Gaston votes no.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Senator Miller. Representative Elliott,
Hello.
how are you? How would you like to vote?
I believe the chairs voted no on this, correct?
That's correct.
Then I would also like to vote no.
Okay, you're all set. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten. Bye.
Senator Miller, let me know when you are ready.
Madam Clerk,
Yes.
Representative Dillon, I wanted to make sure that my vote was properly recorded in the negative.
It is. Yep.
Okay, where I was mumbling this morning. I appreciate it. Thank
No,
you.
you're all set. That's it. Have a great day. Senator Harding. Oh, Senator Miller.
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you see me? I was driving.
No, no worries. Rather you be safe. In the negative?
Yes.
Okay, you're all set. Thank you so much.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Senator Harding. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Senator Harding votes yes.
Okay, you're all set. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Representative Delaney.
Yes, and this is
For Senate 390.
390. Which way did the chairs vote on that?
They voted no.
Okay. I'm going to be casting my voting in the negative.
Okay, you're all set. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.